Hang on. I want to open it up. Can you take a mic up there? I want to open it up a little bit. Yes.
Hi. I just had a question relating to the protests. I feel like it's been continuously shown that Penn State likes to tend to shut down protests that I've seen. It feels like they don't allow the opposite voice to be said. I understand that maybe they amplified what was being spoken about, but I feel like it's the right of students to be able to protest. I just want to hear your response of why Penn State feels the need to shut down protests, or because when I go in the hub and they were handing out flyers about the protests, I would see janitors picking them up and throwing them away immediately after it's being put down. So I was just wondering your response to that.
Well, you may have other examples where we've actually shut down protests. Again, in 14 years, I only know of one example, which was October 24th. Example.
It was just the one with the Milo, I can't say his last name, Milo. It felt like Penn State didn't like the protest. I'm not saying shut down, but it felt like they didn't want something like that to happen, because they then did put the Love is Louder event happening immediately during that. It felt like it was a deterrence from people protesting.
Can I respond to this really fast,
yeah.
And then you respond? Listen, if you were in charge of Penn State, would you want a big cluster happening at the university? Would you really want that? Or do you really want that? How important is it for this student group? You're going to bring this speaker in. There's going to be 150 students that show up and watch him. And 150 students, all right, whatever. Go watch a YouTube video. Could you just watch it? We don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with it. So you with students, when you something happens in here and I don't want to deal with it. Just leave me alone, man. And so can you imagine that Penn State would say, oh, God, this guy right here, his hair is gray. Do you think but he has a lot of it. So, but with too many more of these things, he's going to have hair more like mine. And can you just imagine for a moment that you're in his shoes and you're going yeah, God, jeez, okay, but whatever, we're going to let Milo come. But I really wish we didn't have to deal with that. Can you see that?
No, I could definitely see that. I understand it completely. It's just, it's more just the fact that if they can speak, I feel like the First Amendment right of protesting should be also upheld completely.
No. And it is. It absolutely is.
But it is.
And in fact, the Love is Louder event, which is largely student organized, was in response to the speakers. I mean, one of the things we always talk about is if you don't like the speech, Sam suggested that you can ignore it. That's one approach. Another approach is maybe better speech in response to it. And so the Love is Louder event was meant to as a counterweight, but it was supposed to be an expression of unity and community, and students organized that. And so, I think that we work really hard at letting all this expression happen all over the place. And it's challenging.
It's so challenging. My God.
I wasn't just trying to fight you on it. I just was very curious because of the response that Penn State released multiple times that night. I was just very curious behind the thought process.
No, but listen, but I want to say something to you, right? But what you said are words that go out into the world, right? And what you said when you started was, can you explain why Penn State has so many examples of shutting down protests, right? And so, but you said those words, and they're out there, and it's just not true. It doesn't sound like it's true at all from what I'm hearing. It's not. I've been here 31 years. I've never seen it. Okay, well, I actually have a personal example where I got shut down once, and threatened with arrest for free speech issues. But ultimately, that went to the courts, and that was, Yeah, so this is the thing, right? So this is what I want to say is you have to just be really careful with words. Yeah? Okay. Hey, by the way, whatever some people clapped about, what'd you clap about? Whoever clapped, could someone just say? Yeah. All right, hang on. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so you were talking about how the FBI was involved and stuff, and that you made sure it wasn't a threat beforehand, but then clearly it ended up getting kind of violent, so it did have to be shut down before the event. In a case where there were to be another event like this where someone invites someone that's very controversial, what is your plan to deal with the conflict before it gets that bad?
Well, if I heard that, you're asking if this happens again, another controversial speaker is coming, and we could anticipate that maybe there's going to be some violence. Will we shut it down in advance? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, what plan would you have?
Okay, so there is this this is a really tough and messy and gray concept, okay? None of this is black and white. But there is a concept called prior restraint that is really opposed by the courts in most important ways, meaning trying to restrain speech before it ever happens, anticipating problems that may result. That's wildly disfavored, okay? And this is part of our challenge because we have to have a sense that there is imminent threat, I mean, immediately about to happen, some threat, physical harm to people or to the public, and that would be a very rare circumstance. So it's doubtful that we would do anything differently, although we can manage time, place, and manner issues. And so we might have the speech, instead of having it in Thomas, which is in the core of the campus, we might decide to have the speaker someplace else, which is more removed from the core of campus and not so close to student residences and that sort of thing. So there are some things we could do differently. And in fact, I was part of a conversation where we were debriefing about this just this morning, and we were talking about different kinds of protocols we might use. But in the end, the intent is to try to allow maximum expression of all sorts, including protests, counter-protesters, as much as we possibly can, while also protecting, to the fullest extent we possibly can, public safety. And that's a really tough balance to strike. It's a mess.
It's so difficult because you can imagine that, you went to this protest, as most people who were there just showed up just to see what's going on. I mean, that's why you show up. And you went and you got hurt. And then your parents blame Penn State for you getting hurt. And then somebody else blames Penn State for not shutting it down ahead of time. And then someone blames them if they do. It's just one thing after another. There's like almost a no-win. Bro, do you have
I just wanted to ask you personally, as a university that preaches inclusion and acceptance and has gay pride flags hanging on the campus, inviting a group that is blatantly homophobic, blatantly racist, blatantly anti anything that isn't straight white people, and also at the same time housing individuals of those minority groups a 1 minute walk away from the place that you're hosting them.
Dude,
do you see a problem in that?
Dude, can I first also respond to this first?
In ensuring the safety of your students.
Dude, first off, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You said who invited? Did he invite them?
No, the student
Student organization did. Did you not hear what he said earlier? The student organization has access to these funds. So they applied to get the funds, just like the LGBT, all the queer student organizations have access to the funds. And they want to bring somebody in to support, I don't know, a speaker who is trans to talk trans issues. They get the money, they bring it in, and so that's okay, right? For you, that's great. But this is another student organization that has different opinions. And they said, like, okay, well, we're going to have access to those funds too. And like, so he didn't invite them in. He said, I'm not really sure this is a good idea. If I have my druthers, they wouldn't be here, but whatever. But he didn't invite them in. So now, with that in mind, can you rephrase your question?
Do you think allowing a student organization and allotting them funds to invite a group that is blatantly racist and homophobic into a community that houses, like, students pay money to be housed on this campus, a 1 minute walk away from where you're supporting, not you, the student organization is supporting them, do you find that not to be an imminent threat to the students that are paying to have safe housing on campus?
Well, I don't define imminent threat. The law is defined by the courts, and that wouldn't meet the imminent threat standard for what it's worth. But I've tried to be as plain as I can in trying to point out that the challenge of trying to balance these various interests, it's really extremely hard. So I acknowledge that for students, for staff, for faculty, for members of the community, for parents of students, for alums, it's hard to understand how the university can talk in one moment about its commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and say we're fully committed to that and doing all we can to ensure that everybody feels welcomed here, and yet we would permit a group to invite a hateful representative of some sort to the same campus we're trying to ensure is a place where belonging is going to happen. So that's extremely difficult. It is absolutely extremely difficult. And so what we do is we try to express our values in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, irrespective these speakers who are going to be on our campus. We also understand that inclusion, again, these were students who invited them here. And so we have to be inclusive of all students who are here. And they may not agree with your perspective about things or even with my perspective about things, but their perspective is also a perspective that has to be represented in the inclusion effort that we're trying to pursue. We try to ensure that we communicate that we have resources to support students who are harmed, who feel threatened, who feel like they're unwelcomed. We have support mechanisms for them, and we use better speech in contrast to what we think of as bad speech, that may be hurtful speech, to remind people of the value of community and how we're trying to be mutually supportive. It's not perfect. It's not black or white. It's not either this or that. It's a messy gray world that I inhabit. At least everything's gray in my world, and so this issue is perhaps the most gray of all for an institution like this.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question that if Lori is listening, she's going to be really pissed at me for asking you this question, but I'm going to ask you. And I have to as a sociologist, right? If students here take the crickets approach, okay, this guy, the guy who came, and he's out there speaking somewhere else right now saying stupid stuff, right? And he, you know, he's a guy, the one guy who came, like he's promoting violence. And I'm like, dude, do not, this is deeply troubling, right? But he's doing it right now. Is anybody threatened in here? Does anyone feel threatened because he's out there somewhere talking to somebody about violence and the need to be violent? So if we take the crickets approach in 101 Thomas down the hall and no one shows up except him talking to himself, where's the threat? Can you answer the question, where's the threat?
Well, I think that's pretty much what our view was, and we made that plain. I mean, frankly, I think Uncensored America was unhappy with us because we made some statements as an institution that seemed contrary to their freedom of expression viewpoint, but we were allowing them to have their event, so that was balancing that out. But you're right. If you take the crickets approach, you're not amplifying the hateful message that you're so offended by and that you don't want amplified. When you take the approach that was taken, we clearly have amplified the message. We wouldn't be having this conversation, I don't think, had the crickets approach been taken.
No, and dude, you understand? Like you're in this class, right? Okay, so you know my approach on all these things, right? So I'm not making light of this, but I'm saying like we have to work this out somehow. And like what I don't like is when the rhetoric gets ramped up, like this is a threat to the public safety of our Penn State students. Not if you take the crickets approach. It's not in any way. It wasn't at all. It didn't seem to me. Lori watched an hour and a half of the video. Didn't seem to me until the students showed up who were protesting and like starting screaming all sorts of hateful stuff that I wouldn't repeat to my wife, let alone to my mother or grandmother or my 80-year-old neighbor, the stuff that y'all students were saying. It's like, man. And like that seemed to me, that's where the threat started. I'm like, okay. So I don't know, it's just a thought. Like I just like, you can be more judicious, but I'm going to be a little bit less so. God. And part of this is what I've witnessed and remember, I'm the guy that tried to that Fox News and Tucker Carlson tried to cancel 2 times.
Sam.
You know? Maybe
Sam.
Here, this guy down here. Yeah. Here. No. Okay, go ahead, bro. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I just want to interject because My question is actually related to your point about the crickets approach, and also to Mr. Sims about your planning and the steps you look at. How do you think the internet, social media, the fact that we can get things at a fingertip, or the anonymity of internet where we're kind of like protected by that, kind of like stops that cricket approach, or like what kind of like concerns do you have now in this day and age compared to your job maybe 14 years ago? Like what are the concerns? What's different?
Yeah, well, the internet just further complicates things because there's more speech out there, and it's unconstrained by many things these days. It's just that's where a lot of the hate speech that we've gotten complaints about has been on social media quite often, and we're expected to do something about that, to monitor that, to manage that, and we really can't because of the enormity of it, and we don't have the resources for that. But it has just made this problem that we're talking about that much worse.
Wait, hang on. Yo, hang on. My watch says we have 3 more minutes, and Damon is finishing a point, and then we have one more question. So, go.
I finished my point.
You finished? Yeah. Okay. Go, bro.
Okay. I understand that. Oh. What's up, Brad? Oh.
Go ahead, bro.
I understand like the legal responsibility you have to, allow the speakers to be here, and the responsibility to, protect like student safety and everything. But what do you say to, and I also understand the cricket approach that you guys were just talking about, and that maybe, his message wouldn't be shared and spread so much if just no one would show up. But what do you say to, so October 24th was an example of when students came and caused a ruckus and protested, we effectively stopped him from speaking, and so that was also a method of stopping his message from being spread. So what do you think is the best way to like deter protests in the future, when my goal, I went to the protest for a few minutes, and my goal was not to protest Penn State, it was to protest like that guy and those people, and to not let their message be spread. So what do you say to me when I was successful in my goal of stopping him from speaking?
Okay, we have 2 minutes. You get 1 minute, I get 1 minute, because I also want to answer to this.
Well, let me quickly just say, it's called the Heckler's veto. When because of the heckler, something is shut down, that seems like it's violating somebody's speech in there someplace. And so you're right. This is an example where I think a lesson that has been learned unavoidably is that's the way we shut down the speech we don't want. I just think we all need to be thinking about what kind of world we want to live in. Do you really want government? I'm government, basically, in this. You want me deciding what you can hear and what you can't hear? If you give me that authority in this instance, I have it for everything, and I don't think that's what you want.
Okay, final thoughts. Yo, hang on. Final thought. Bro, you may have shut it down, okay? Whoever may have shut it down. But you also... another unintended consequence is that you gained a lot of adherence to another side of these issues, that you gave power to the voice that these two speakers represent in ways that you just don't understand. Okay? So you reached your goal, but you also probably took yourself pretty far away from your goal at the same time. And so I wouldn't be too quick to consider it a victory.